All right, guys. So like I said, first meeting of the year, talk a little bit about what's been going on, and then we're going to jump in to the heat map, a little bit about that, what that means, and I'll talk about that in a second. But hold on, I got to turn this page down. It's distracting me here. So what's important about these meetings is, again, if you're watching them in the future, the first few minutes might not be relevant. Like the drivers of the market might not be the drivers in 2 weeks, 2 months, 2 years, obviously. But right now, you have to pay attention to U.S.-China trade because those headlines are moving us. Government shutdown because once they come up with a resolution, if it's a black and white headline, we're going to rally. If it's during market hours and it's something that's pivotal. Brexit driving us when it becomes hot, especially European markets. This Mueller report's probably going to be anticlimactic. The market's already priced in the fact that it's not going to be a bombshell, but you never know. You want to be aware of it. I think 4 or 5 weeks they're going to release a report on that. But the main driver is the U.S.-China trade talks. It's this government shutdown and it's Brexit, and we've been weak coming in from the strong Friday session with some weak data out of China. And one thing I read was it's kind of like some of the weakest growth numbers they've seen in decades. And they're doing everything to stimulate their economy over there, right? They're still growing, but not as hot as they're used to. It's got people worried they're the second biggest economy in the world. And if they suffer, it's one of those Asian contagion type of things potentially. And then you look at the trade wars, potential trade war. And I don't type these things up and do a slide. You guys, if you're not on top of what's driving, then you're obviously either not in the trading room or it's a big learning experience that you just learned right now. If you don't know what's driving the market, go become a plumber because trading ain't for you. Drivers change, what's pushing it, what's not. If you don't know, ask. That's what being in a good group does, right? The other thing I'm going to touch on, I'm not going to make this particular session about the new software I created, but it's part of a goal that I want everybody to have this year. It's taken me a while to roll it out for different reasons, but it works on Sierra and NinjaTrader 7 and 8. If you don't have it, get it. You know the guy who made it, me. It's not expensive. It's a one-time fee. Works on Sierra, like I said, NinjaTrader 7 and 8. I don't care if you make one note a day. Get it. It's silly not to know what you're thinking, what you're missing, collecting that data. You're not going to write it down and keep great journals. Yeah, you could also do that, but most people aren't going to continue. That's not practical, all right? Most people aren't going to type in your notes. Tell me how you feel. Talk it out. verbaljournaltrading.com. Go to it. Get it for NinjaTrader 7 or 8 or Sierra. You'll see me use it. I go back and use it as a playback. It's great. I don't want to make this session about that, but I wanted to make mention that everybody needs a goal every year and make them small and achievable, and that is make a note a day on how the hell you're doing and have it relevant for the charts. But I'll talk more about this at another session. Today, what we're going to talk about is the heat map and why buyers and sellers don't always have to meet. What does that mean? How to read this heat map. What I like about the heat map, and I always knew it existed, but I never got into it because I was able to read things out on the dome, and this makes it so much more visual with a heat map. One thing that Brett Steenbarger said at the end of last year, and something I've been saying a different way, is there's always a better way to see the same thing, is the way I put it. He says you always got to look for your advantage, the new edge, the new advantage of what's going to give you an edge. And that's what we do. That's why these meetings are weekly instead of you guys just getting an educational program with a start and a finish and saying goodbye, good luck. If it's a good educational program, there should be no finish to it. So the heat map, what do I mean? Buyers and sellers that don't have to meet. I'll explain that as we go along. What is and how to identify orders, right? Either buyers or sellers. That's it. Buy orders and sell orders. Two ways to identify them. I'm not going to spend a long time on this slide. And the reason why is because track 3, there's a video that you should watch to identify buyers and sellers, but I'm briefly going to talk about it. Then liquidity magnets. What does it mean, and why is liquidity a magnet? When I use the word liquidity or inventory, it's the same word. It's buying or selling, all right? But I did feel it necessary to talk about the two ways to identify both buying and selling. Aggressive buyers, you could see with edge zones. When they meet the filter criteria, aggressive buying comes in, you'll see a green edge zone, right? The second way to identify buying is passive, which is what the heat map does. A resting bid is someone that's passive. They rest a bid in the book. When you're aggressive, you lift an offer, and the edge zone will show you that when a lot of aggressive buyers come to the market. Typically, you'll see a green edge zone, right? Passive buyers, I'm going to show you what that looks like in a heat map in a second, but these are the two ways to identify buying. Two ways to identify selling, same thing. Aggressive sellers are red edge zones, hitting the bid. People coming to the market and saying, sold. The other way to identify selling is passive sellers. You rest an offer above the price. You're passive, right? Let's go back up to this real quick. Aggressive buyers, edge zone greens, you'll see. Let's use a housing example really quick because I'm going to use it in a second. Someone puts a for sale sign in their front yard and says, I'm offering this house for $500,000. A buyer doesn't come in and say $450 or $480. He just knocks on the door, says, I'll buy it. That's an aggressive buyer, right? He went and lifted the offer. He didn't play games. He didn't negotiate. He didn't bid for it. He just went impatiently and bought it. Why? Because he was afraid maybe others are going to show up. Doesn't happen often in real estate, but it does happen. That's an aggressive buyer, right? He went to the price and just said, I'll buy it. That's aggressive buyers in real estate. Same situation in the dome or the price ladder. You lift an offer. If a lot of people do it versus hitting the bid, the edge zone appears on its screen. Now, if you're passive and you're like, 500,000, I think it's only worth 475. I'll bid 450. Maybe we'll meet in the middle. And you play that game. You're bidding it. Are you going to get filled at 450? Maybe. Maybe not. You're taking that risk. You're taking the risk of the seller saying nope. You're taking the risk of more buyers showing up, taking that 500 out, and then you're really in trouble. So make sure you're clear as the two ways to identify buyers and two ways to identify sellers. It's the only two ways to identify buying and selling, aggressively or passive. And I'm not talking about order types because there's always some guy that says, well, there's a buy stop and a sell stop and an MOC, OCO, aggressive and passive. All right, let's start and finish there. Aggressive and buyers, aggressive buyers, aggressive sellers, passive buyers, passive sellers. All right. Now, this is a slide that if it doesn't really paint a picture as to how price moves, I don't know if anything else will. When I said earlier, buyers and sellers don't always meet. Those buyers don't always meet certain sellers. What do I mean by that? Let's say you have a few houses for sale. They'd be considered sellers, right? Liquidity of selling at $500,000 is the price of these homes, okay? And then way below the market, you've got these individuals representing buyers or buy liquidity. And they're looking to buy a house around $300,000. Well, I got news for you. These buyers down here aren't going to buy from these sellers up here. It's not going to happen. If you make 30 grand a year, you're not at a Mercedes-Benz dealership. Sorry, you're buying a Honda. So these guys down in here, they're buyers. They're real buyers. They're just not real buyers for these homes. And these sellers aren't going to say, you know what? Maybe I will sell it for 320 or 310 to meet that buying demand below. Not going to happen. Maybe it happened in 2008 when it was a super extreme example. It just isn't going to happen. There's too much stuff in the middle that drives price either up or down. I'm going to show that in a second. So are we clear that just because there's buyers below and sellers above doesn't mean that one side's going to win and the other side's going to lose and these two guys are going to meet together in the middle? These buyers are never going to negotiate to buy a $500,000 house. A realtor qualifies buyers before they waste time and show them properties on a Saturday to make sure what they're qualified to buy a house for. If they can only get a $300,000 loan, they're not going to show them $500,000 homes. They're wasting everybody's time. They're real buyers, though, right? Where do buyers go? Think about this for a second. Where will buyers go? They'll go to a place where people are selling. So if you're looking to buy a car, where do you go? You either go online or you go to a car dealership. Whether it's online or a brick and mortar, you go where people are selling cars if you're looking to buy a car. And then you're specific to the kind of car you want. So people who are selling will attract people who want to buy. People who are buying will attract people who want to sell. So if you're a buyer of a car, you go to a car dealership. If you're a seller of artwork, you go to an auction. Why? What's at an auction? Buyers. So let's get back to this example of the housing. So you got sellers above, you got buyers below. But these two buyers and sellers are targets they're not going to meet. What's going to happen? What's going to drive price either up to 500 or down to 300? I meant to put this in arrow in. These buyers don't meet these sellers. But in the middle, you have a house that's for sale somewhere in the middle, found a buyer. Another house for sale, 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 found a buyer. Another house for sale. And do you notice this is in a P&F rotation? Take a look at that, right? But this house found a buyer. Also had another buyer. Wait a second, there was another buyer. Where's the house? There's no house. Another buyer, another buyer, another buyer, and up they went. Think about that for a second. Does this remind you of a chart? It's a range. It's a breakout. The sellers got exhausted. There were no more homes to buy. So the buyers who are in the middle here had to find the next area of liquidity. That's why selling liquidity, one reason why it's a magnet, because there are buyers that have to go there. And when they stick out, it often becomes an identifiable place where the market's going to go, hence the word magnet. So think about this for a second. I literally put these houses in a P&F rotation. So the market goes up, it goes down. It goes up a little bit, goes down a little bit. But they're finding buyers and sellers. They're meeting until here. Until like, wait, I got no house to buy. Well, I'll pay a little bit more. Where do I have to go? The people in the middle probably could afford the 500. These guys aren't the ones buying the 500. These guys in the middle have to go to the next level. Take a look how I put the zero in it. See the rotation? And it gets clustered in here and finally has to break out. Gets clustered in here and finally has to break out. Now, you could have the same example of a few houses for sale. Buyers have been exhausted, so we go down to this level. The fight is what we're looking for because the destination we could find with the heat map. Let me show this again, only with a little bit more maybe realistic comedy to it. You've got buyers and sellers at the same price levels. Buyers and sellers aren't going to connect. You find a buyer, find a buyer, find a buyer, find a buyer, same thing, find a buyer. All of a sudden, this guy gets satisfied, this guy doesn't. But these guys in here, these two knuckleheads, they're like, listen, honey, we'll find another house with the same kitchen. We'll find another house with the same kitchen. She goes, we better. And then there's the scramble. You're going to pay more because you pissed off the wife. You were too patient. You didn't jump. You could have bought one of these houses. You waited. There's no more houses for sale. You had to go to the next level. You cost yourself more money. Happens all the time. Emotion. You might actually pay up. This house was $475. You might actually pay $500 for a house that isn't as nice because emotion was involved. So do you guys understand where liquidity is above and below? Why one reason why it could act as a magnet? Are we clear? All right. Now let's bring in the magnets, meaning the heat map. And on Sierra, I color them both the same. I don't want blue below and red above because I don't want to have to determine if a blue shade is close to what a shade looks like in red or pink. I know below the candlestick is passive buying and above the candlestick is passive selling. Easy enough, right? What did we know when we left the room? We knew the market was having trouble following through today. But we also knew that there was a congestion box all in here. Let me get rid of that a second. Hold on. We knew that there was a congestion box from here to here. We knew that be careful long as it approached there, be careful short if it approached up there. Because either a breakout to the upside or a breakout to the downside was going to happen because the buyers were at 40 even and it was lit up all session long. It chops around there. Next buying was in here. Next buying was in here, chopped around here. Next liquidity was 33. Soon as it lit up a little bit at 38, 39, I said it maybe a few minutes too early. I said, but that's where it's going to go. Right before we started this meeting, I said it right in here. It dipped down for another 1.5, and then it went right to 38, 39. Why did I say 38, 39? Because that's where the other houses went up for sale. So the people missed buying it here, and the sellers exhausted had to go to the next area where there was enough selling. Now, I know that there is selling in the book at every little price because I know some smart guys say, well, there's always sellers and buyers. But where's the liquidity? There's a difference between liquidity, inventory, and just selling, right? There's a difference between a whole warehouse with iPhones and a whole empty warehouse with just a few shelves filled with iPhones. Liquidity is what's going to attract price. We knew this was a big magnet down here at 40. It's just a matter of qualifying the damn thing to get down there because there's also magnets above, right? And it's not that easy to say, oh, just get short all day and you get 40s. Doesn't work that way. That's not what I'm advocating. But what I am advocating is understand this session is all about understanding the logic of why these heat map brighter areas, use the word bright, would be magnets. The logic of why it would go there based on the analogy I gave with those slides. Buyers go to sellers and sometimes sellers go to buyers, but they're not always the same people. People who make 30 grand a year can't afford a Mercedes. So they're not going to be at a Mercedes-Benz dealership. But there is a dealership for them. I actually made a couple of these notes back in here before the market opened about being bearish, and it was based on how the liquidity was stacking up. I had one even earlier than that. This is the verbal journal where if I click this and play it, you might not be able to hear it because it was faint and the mic is far away, but it gives an explanation of why I was bearish. Just one way to use that verbal journal. So you're chopping sideways all in here and you finally get let out. It looks easier than it is, but it is easier when you know where the targets are. Keep yourself off the wrong side first. 43 will end up trading if it stays up in here. It's just a matter of when. We're going to go probably back up there at some point. Is it easy? Oh, just buy it. No, it's not going to happen that way, but it is a logical target that you keep an eye on. I just moved the chart up to there. If you look at the immediate areas above and below price, where's price at? 34.25, right there, correct? The immediate price above and below to me would be right in there and right in here. Is it brighter below or above? It's brighter below, so I'd be bearish. Always cautious that we already broke from 38, 37, 36, but I'd be careful getting long because I think there's an attraction to go lower. Now, if it goes all the way up to 39, I'm still not going to be thinking that. I'll be wrong way before that. The point is, immediately above and immediately below, I did check. Close and reopen. You should get the heat map to appear. If not, it's not that hard to build. Do you just get short at 34 thinking to go to 32? You can't. But you can wait for a little pullback qualifier to take a shot because you do think 32 is ultimately a price to go to. Plus, when talking about this, we already broke from 37, 36 to 33. Always know, this is a previous session, but always know where you're at on the map. So when you take a look at, I'll go to an arrow, you take a look at the immediate area above and below where price is, then you could go out and say 40 even and 43 are some targets, and there's some houses for 500,000 and 600,000 up there. The buyers are at 32. There was some buying at 30 that got pulled. And then it gets pretty dark below 30. Let's bring the chart up a little bit. 32. Then the next area between 30 is 27, 20, this area. Is this a target? Absolutely. Is it going to get there today? I have no idea. All I do know is that I'm not going to be long as it's cruising on down there. I know that it's a magnet that they're saying, come to me, come to me. So you create probabilities, just like we did with this one, that it's brighter below than above, you should be bearish. Brighter below than above, you should be bearish. It just means there's not as many sellers as buyers, and the sellers got to go find the buyers. You got a lot of artwork. You can't sell it out of your kitchen, so you go to an auction house because why? They're going to get you a better price. Why? Because more buyers go to an auction. You got cattle, you go to a cattle auction. It's easier than to put a sign out in front of your farm, buy a couple cattle. So you give up a little bit to bring your product to sellers. That's where futures really came about. People looking to get a fair price on their cattle that isn't ready for slaughter, fair price on their corn that's not ready for harvest. This is why if you're bearish at 34 because you think it's going to go to 32, you can't just sell it. Because on the map, we just broke about 3 or 4 points. So you're risky. Even though you're bearish doesn't mean you're short. You got to see where you're at on the map. You're better off waiting for a pullback, looking for a qualifier if you still think you can go to 32. And remember, this is just one element to create an opinion or a bias. Bias and opinion mean the same thing. Liquidity inventory mean the same thing. Then bias and opinion mean the same thing. Where do you think it's going? Then when do you think it could go? Selling a pullback, when I say a pullback, this retracement, if you look at my arrow, allows you to be in a better location if you're wrong. Forget about if you're right. You sell a pullback, generally you're in a better location if you're wrong because the market's already rallied to where you got in. So these are all, just to recap, these are all resting bids and offers. Resting bids below the candlesticks, resting offers above. Market doesn't want to go where there's no sellers. It's gonna drive past it. You go to buy a car, you're not going to go to dealerships that are empty, are you? Not going to happen. Let's get rid of this for a second and go to the room chart. This is the charts you guys are used to looking at in the room. And this shows you a little bit more detail than just the heat map. It comes into, you say seller retracement. Where? Comes into old support over here, new resistance. I don't know if it went green and then cut it, but point is that you could be bearish down around 34, but do you want to get short when it just broke from 38 and you're in potential support? Hell no. You sell a pullback if you want to get short. You know that selling a pullback puts you in a better position if you're wrong to try to play it to the 32 target. Does that mean you could put an offer at 36, life is good, you get filled? Of course not. Everybody knows better than that. But we're going to build on using the heat map as far as what different things mean. I want to run through everything in the first section, but what different things could mean and the best way I could explain it. It's one thing to know how to use something. It's another thing to be able to explain how to use it. And if you don't know the logic as to why it might work and why it creates a probability stack, well, then you're never going to use it. And that's why a lot of people use market profile. It seems like it makes sense, but they really don't know why it would work. And they have trouble finding good locations. That's a weakness of profiling is it's okay for finding a good bias, but it's not for trading. When to trade that bias or opinion. I want you to take a look at the heat map again. And what the heat map could potentially be is what the profile is going to look like. Think about that a second. When you look at a volume don't look at a TPO, look at a volume profile. It shows you how the volume is already laid out. A heat map is showing you how the volume and the profile might look like. Now, if you had both, what's going to be a bigger edge? If you had a really high probability of what a profile is going to look like and what the profile already looks like, what's a bigger edge? What it's going to look like. That's why people get stuck in this business analyzing the past too much to predict the future, and they ignore the present. Why? Because it's harder to analyze the present. That's one reason. Second reason why is most people get taught the wrong way first. And it's not their fault. It's just the way it goes. I believe if you shut down, so you guys want the layout of my chart and you got Sierra, I could share it. And I've shared it with a handful of people. So Sierra charts is what I use mainly now because of the functionality of the heat map. The edge zones are available on it. So is the verbal journal. What questions do we have? There were a couple that I seen while I was talking. Let me go back to it. So here's a good question and something I'll cover as we go forward in more detail. But if I see inventory showing up on the buy side, which is blue on this chart, and I'm long, that's good because I see buying coming in to push it. Slightly different than a magnet because it's at the market. You know what I mean? It's different than if it's well below the market because then it's a magnet. That's where buyers are. They're far away. But when they come up to where it is, I feel good. I feel good if I want to sell it for a profit. So if I'm long, I'm a seller, right? I feel good as a seller, not a short. I'm a seller. If I'm long, I'm a seller. I feel good if I'm a seller if buyers are showing up. If I'm selling a house, I'm long that house, right? I'm selling the house. I feel good if a lot of people come look at my house. So that's the way I would look at this blue that shows up. If you're looking to get long, it could be a good confirmation and qualifier also. Buyers are showing up. Also a good qualifier if it gets below it, be careful. Don't be too scientific with it. But that's a good question. If you're a seller, you want to see buyers, don't you? I don't care if you're selling it 7, 8 ticks above where we're at right now. You're still a seller. You need buyers to get you there. How many people are on Sierra? How many people are thinking of getting on Sierra? I'll give you information on where to go for these edge zones if you are. If you're on Sierra and you want my trading room layout, you need to send me your account name. And this goes for people watching in the future. You need to send me, hold on a second, and I'll show it to you. You go to your main screen, okay, and you go to help, left click down to about, left click, verbal journal is my account name. That's not your account name, that's mine. Find your account name and send it to me. Any spaces or caps, make sure you include it. But that's how you find it. Well, go there, Mike, when you're ready. Paul, go there, take a trial to it. Like I said, I don't like to change platforms. I leg in and out when I've done it only a few times in my career. What's helpful and shortens your learning curve sometimes to nothing is to have some good templates that are similar to ones that you're using. And then with any software, once you find a couple of the key kind of navigation, they become easy as long as it's a quality platform. So I'm not going to support or talk about a platform if it's stunk. It doesn't. It's good. I've been surprised how good it is. That's a way to read order flow. So, follow up question to the previous one is what do you do when passive traders show up before the ultimate magnet is right? So, if you're thinking of getting long, you got a magnet at 32, 33 even. And at 33 half, buyers show up. That's reading order flow. Real time buyers are coming in. You might want to take your shot there. Now that you have the information, that's what you watch. I personally would be inclined to want to see, I would want to think my magnet won't be reached, at least at that moment in that sequence when buyers are showing up ahead of it. It does need to be package 5 to have heat map, TPO, and edge zones. Not just edge zones, but some of the other features you got to have package 5. What's nice about the the software is you get a lot more for less. You can't say that in most places. Give me your file again, Chuck, or your account name again. I'll send it after this meeting. those that are interested in the Sierra stuff, make sure you go to the link I sent you. If you don't have Sierra, well, here's the link. I'll just show it to you. If you don't have Sierra, then you include it. If you already have it, then just do the indicator. Then select monthly, and then go from there. But I had Lee over at Emoji Trading develop these, tweak some of the things on them. And what's nice about him so far, so good, he's really responsive. The people that have went through him have had really good things to say. He doesn't work for Sierra, but I believe he's a reseller of it, and he doesn't have to support it, but it behooves him to do it because it's essentially getting people on the right track, and he's a real responsive guy. I found that to be the case for me, but then I've gotten the same feedback from others that have used it. But it's like one of those pieces of software, once you get going, there's not too much support needed. But the add-on, mostly you're paying for, are the edge zones. And there's some cool updates that I had a meeting with him yesterday, some cool updates that he's also working on for him that'll be included. You know, when I send the layout, you're going to get, I believe, because someone sent me their layout just in the future. When you get sent a layout, you get a message that explains to you guys what to do, and then it's, I think you close and re-enter, and your stuff is there. But you got to know how to open up a chart book once it's there. So you go to File, you go to Open Chart Book. The one I gave you guys is Edge Zone's Trading Room. But I followed directions and I got other people's chart books. You're just going to get a message and you got to follow it. It's pretty simple. Lee, what site were you trying to enter through? All right, so here, interesting. On a different periodicity, same thing. I play with the colors. Blue and purplish are liquidity for higher size. But on a 12 PNF. So you see how the 40s were laying there the whole time, how these were pretty much of a magnet, came down, bounced off it, came down, chopped around it, came down, went through. Well, this guy just appeared back in here, that is, came down, went through these guys, went into some edge zone support, bounced off of it, that 33, 32 even area. Now it's going back up to 38. Remember what we talked about? If, let's say, you thought 32 was a target, but you sold it on a retracement somewhere in here, if you're still short, you're not in this course, right? There should have been something, whether it was in here or in here, to get you to say, just not the right time yet. Also, remember, we had quite a bit of a move from 10:30 to 11. It wasn't an easy first couple hours. Glavis for what setting or for what chart? This one? The 12 PNF? I'll leave it up there. The lower left. Here, I'll leave it up here and you could take a look. All right, Mike, take care. I don't want it's fine for people to want their settings exactly like mine at first. I get it. And maybe my settings are the settings you stay with, but don't be afraid to tweak them. Don't be afraid to see what fits better for your eyes and understand how to tweak them. Because this kind of stuff of how to tweak them, I don't want to get into what each one of these mean because I taught myself that, right? It's just, I think they're pretty much self-explanatory, but you play with them and then you get used to the software and then you can leave it alone after a while. But it is important to get a big head start by sharing templates, or as Sierra calls them, chart books. But I definitely would use mine at first. Maybe stay with them. All I'm saying is don't be afraid to play with them. You might find that they are best for you, but don't be afraid to tweak them and see what helps you. You got to know first how to use them, right? Why are they magnets? We covered that today. Hopefully, the analogies make sense. We're not just done with heat map education, but people, were asking me when I started showing this heat map, why? Why are they magnets? Great question. You guys got the link for the edge zones at Emoji if you want them. Those watching this in the future, I'll post it somewhere on the video title. But this is the first of many Tuesday sessions. And so I'm going to stop the recording for those in the future. Also, remember, goal. Do something more than you did last year. Review better. Everybody could review better. Everybody.